In the 1950s, GM did not just build cars, they built a traveling city of tomorrow. If you want to uncover more lost chapters of automotive history, subscribe to Forgotten Detroit. Spending millions of dollars, they launched Motorama, an extravagant exhibition that mesmerized over 10 million Americans. It was a dazzling display of concept vehicles, dancers, and space-age technology. Just listen to the crowds marvel at this spectacle. GM was selling a shiny, optimistic vision of the American future, complete with self-driving highways and utopian suburbs. But this multi-million-dollar spectacle was not just a car show. It was a carefully crafted illusion that promised a future America would never actually get. America emerged from World War II as an absolute industrial juggernaut. Years of strict military rationing had finally ended, and factories that had spent the early 1940s churning out bombers and tanks were suddenly retooled for civilian life. The post-war economy was exploding. A rapidly expanding middle class now found their pockets lined with unprecedented disposable income, paired with a soaring national optimism about the future. As the largest corporation on Earth, General Motors recognized this surging confidence and decided to capitalize on it. They realized that dominating the automotive market in this new era required far more than traditional magazine ads. It required a physical, unforgettable experience. They conceived Motorama as a massive, traveling corporate World's Fair. GM packed up their futuristic vision and transported it directly into the heart of major cities across the United States, from the Waldorf Astoria in New York to civic auditoriums in San Francisco. This was consumerism elevated to high theatrical art. Visitors did not just walk into a sterile convention center to kick the tires on a new sedan. They were immediately immersed in a Broadway-caliber spectacle. GM hired top-tier television choreographers, costume designers, and stage engineers to craft a shimmering alternate reality. The sprawling exhibitions featured massive rotating turntables, elaborate neon lighting rigs, and dozens of professional dancers performing synchronized routines directly alongside the merchandise. Just listen to the grand, theatrical atmosphere of these events. Backed by live symphonic orchestras, the entire production was meticulously designed to make the simple act of buying a car feel like participating in the unstoppable march of human progress. GM was selling a comprehensive lifestyle where engineering would solve all societal problems. But a lavish stage show alone was not enough to anchor this grand societal dream. To make the American public truly believe in a seamless, science fiction tomorrow, GM needed physical heroes. They needed machines that looked like they had driven straight out of the 21st century, and they came in the form of the most outrageous, rocket-inspired concept vehicles ever designed. The mastermind behind these radical designs was Harley Earl, GM's visionary vice president of styling. Earl was captivated by aviation, famously drawing inspiration from the twin booms of the Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter plane. He channeled this obsession into the 1951 LeSabre, a fully functional concept car dripping with aerospace aesthetics. The LeSabre featured a panoramic wraparound windshield, a prominent jet intake front grille, and dramatic tail fins mimicking the stabilizers of a rocket. It was practically a fighter jet, adapted for the suburbs, equipped with highly experimental technology like heated seats and a moisture sensor that automatically raised the convertible top at the first drop of rain. These machines looked ready to break the sound barrier, but GM knew they belonged on a highway that did not even exist yet. The LeSabre established a space-age styling language that would dominate American manufacturing for the next decade. Earl was not satisfied with just designing futuristic luxury cruisers. He also wanted to challenge European dominance in the performance market. At the 1953 Motorama, GM unveiled the Chevrolet Corvette, shifting the entire paradigm of American sports cars. Unlike the heavy, steel-bodied behemoths of the era, the early Corvette utilized a revolutionary fiberglass body. This allowed for sleek, aerodynamic curves that seemed molded directly by a wind tunnel. While the display models gleamed under pristine theatrical lighting, their true appeal lay in the machinery. The visual elegance of these aerospace-inspired vehicles was perfectly anchored by a brief, silent pause on the showroom floor, suddenly shattered by the visceral, guttural roar of a vintage V8 engine starting up. This created an unforgettable sensory experience, contrasting immaculate, futuristic imagery with raw, unadulterated mechanical power. You did not just look at these vehicles, you felt them vibrating through the auditorium. Earl and his engineering teams had successfully transformed the automobile from a basic utility into a vessel of pure aspiration. They effectively convinced the American public that driving a GM vehicle meant piloting a personal spacecraft into tomorrow. If the LeSabre was a fighter jet adapted for the suburbs, the Firebird series completely abandoned the suburban part. Between 1954 and 1958, GM introduced Firebird 1, 2, and 3. These were not traditional automobiles. They were turbine-powered rockets on wheels, designed to push the absolute limits of styling and automotive engineering. Firebird 1 featured a literal fiberglass fuselage, swept wings, and a single-seat bubble canopy. It looked exactly like a military fighter plane, lacking only the ability to take flight. By the time Firebird 3 debuted at the 1959 Motorama, the design sported 7 different aerodynamic wings and tail fins, dual bubble domes, and an ultrasonic key. It even replaced the traditional steering wheel and foot pedals with a single central joystick to control steering, braking, and acceleration. The propulsion system was just as extreme. GM engineers replaced conventional piston engines with experimental gas turbines, attempting to harness the massive thrust of aircraft technology for everyday civilian commutes. The exhaust out the back idled at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, making it wildly impractical and highly dangerous for stop-and-go city traffic. But GM knew these jet cars did not belong in regular traffic jams. They required entirely new infrastructure. To solve this, they pitched the electronic highway, a highly detailed blueprint for autonomous driving. In promotional films shown to millions of Americans, GM depicted modern families cruising down the interstate in the 4-seat Firebird 2. The driver would contact a highway control tower via a two-way radio, sync the car to an automated guidance system, and then simply swivel their seat backward, while an electrical wire embedded directly in the asphalt steered the vehicle and radar regulated its speed to avoid collisions. The family could safely play board games, pass around snacks, and relax. It was a utopian promise of absolute leisure, where the daily burden of manual navigation was outsourced to a centralized, infallible network of highway computers. But a futuristic car and a smart highway needed a destination. GM had a master plan for that too, and it was waiting right inside your house. General Motors owned the appliance manufacturer Frigidaire, making the American home a critical piece of their business model. At Motorama, experimental vehicles shared the spotlight with the Frigidaire kitchen of tomorrow. This exhibit presented a domestic space completely reimagined by industrial engineering. Attendees gathered to watch glass dome ovens bake food in minutes using early microwave technology. Demonstrators loaded plates into ultrasonic dishwashers, claiming the machine would vibrate grease away using high-frequency sound waves. Cabinets featured motorized shelves that lowered to eye level, hiding tools out of sight when not in use. An automated recipe dispenser acted as a primitive personal computer, allowing users to select meal plans from a photo index and receive printed ingredient cards with the push of a button. This appliance display was not a separate marketing campaign. GM used Motorama to tie the automobile directly to the emerging suburban lifestyle, treating the house and the garage as an inseparable pair. The turbine-powered car in the driveway, the electronic highway taking you to the city, and the mechanized kitchen waiting for you at home were all presented as parts of one unified technological ecosystem. General Motors was not simply trying to sell a vehicle. They were selling an entire way of living. They wanted the public to see their daily existence powered, guided, and comforted exclusively by GM products. By merging automotive design with home appliances, the corporation positioned itself as the sole architect of the post-war American dream. Everything on the showroom floor was designed to project absolute control over the future. It was the ultimate corporate utopia, a perfect world wrapped in chrome. But maintaining a perfect illusion is expensive, and the cracks were starting to show. GM was essentially funding a traveling World's Fair. Staging Motorama required massive logistical coordination, moving dozens of concept vehicles, heavy mechanical displays, and hundreds of cast members across the country in a dedicated fleet of custom-built transport trucks. The financial toll of designing one-off fiberglass car bodies and fully functional smart home prototypes year after year was quietly becoming unsustainable. By the late 1950s, Motorama had evolved into an absolute spectacle. The line between a Broadway musical and a car commercial completely disappeared. General Motors hired top-tier choreographers, a full live orchestra, and a massive cast of professional singers and dancers to perform elaborate stage routines. They built complex revolving turntables and hydraulic lifts to elevate the vehicles in mid-air. Actors dressed in futuristic spacesuits or glamorous evening gowns sang original, fully orchestrated scores about the wonders of fiberglass design and turbine power. It was an unprecedented theatrical production designed to overwhelm the senses. The sheer scale of these live performances made it easy to forget that the event was simply a massive sales pitch. None of the rocket-inspired bubble cars or automated highway dioramas on stage were ever meant to enter production. These futuristic concepts operated as highly effective loss leaders, carefully designed to create a powerful halo effect for the entire brand. General Motors knew perfectly well that the average family visiting a Motorama exhibition could not buy a titanium-bodied concept vehicle. But after spending an afternoon immersed in a choreographed high-tech utopia, those attendees were much more likely to walk into their local dealership and purchase a standard Chevrolet Bel Air or a Pontiac Chieftain. The glittering fantasy sold the steel reality. The millions of dollars poured into the theatrical stage shows and experimental prototypes paid for themselves by moving millions of conventional, mass-market sedans off the dealership lots across the country. The public was completely mesmerized. But behind closed doors, GM executives were looking at a shifting cultural landscape that would soon kill their greatest creation. The limitless post-war optimism that fueled the early 1950s was beginning to fracture. A brief but sharp economic recession in 1958 forced leadership to scrutinize their budget, bringing the astronomical costs of the traveling exhibition under a microscope. Changing consumer tastes also meant that a glittering song and dance vision of tomorrow was rapidly losing its novelty. The exact extravagance that made Motorama a national phenomenon was quietly turning into a massive corporate liability. The traveling spectacle was burning through cash. General Motors realized they were spending upwards of $10 million annually just to physically transport a stage show across the country. Meanwhile, television was rapidly taking over the American living room. By the late 1950s, network broadcasts offered an incredibly efficient alternative to live events. Why pack up dozens of transport trucks, hire hundreds of professional performers, and rent massive venues when a one-minute television commercial could instantly reach 50 million viewers at a fraction of the cost? The financial math no longer favored the traveling carnival. Television allowed GM to put their latest models in front of a massive national audience with significantly less logistical overhead. Simultaneously, the cultural definition of the future was fundamentally changing. In October 1957, the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1 into orbit. The actual space race had officially begun. Suddenly, a heavy fiberglass concept car featuring fake rocket tail fins and a plastic bubble canopy looked less like a bold scientific prediction and more like a harmless novelty. The American public stopped looking at the highway and started looking directly at the moon. NASA was actively building real rockets and training actual astronauts. The United States government would soon commit the entire nation to a lunar landing, which made General Motors' terrestrial highway utopia feel instantly obsolete. The genuine high-stakes thrill of orbital flight completely overshadowed the theoretical promise of a gas turbine sedan. Faced with skyrocketing production costs, a far more efficient television advertising medium, and a major cultural shift toward real space exploration, corporate leadership officially pulled the plug. Motorama quietly shut its doors in 1961. There was no grand finale and no farewell tour, just a swift dismantling of the most expensive corporate roadshow in American history. The elaborate theatrical sets were torn down, and the glittering prototypes were pushed into remote storage warehouses. But what happened to the automated, utopian future they promised 10 million Americans? The automated highway never arrived. Instead of kicking back in an air-conditioned glass lounge while radar smoothly guided your turbine-powered cruiser, modern commuting became a daily exercise in endurance. The grand, sweeping infrastructure General Motors promised devolved into six-lane gridlock, aging concrete overpasses, and endless suburban sprawl. Even the automobiles themselves lost their flamboyant, space-age individuality. Rather than bubble canopies, chrome bumpers, and titanium tail fins, today's vehicles have become homogenized. They are highly efficient, aerodynamic pods strictly dictated by global safety regulations and fuel economy standards. The soaring, jet-age aesthetic was systematically replaced by practical, wind tunnel-tested conformity. General Motors successfully sold an incredibly appealing fantasy. They depicted an effortless society where industrial engineering instantly solved every human problem. But their pristine corporate utopia fatally underestimated the messy realities of long-term urban planning and environmental impact. You cannot simply pave over an entire continent without severe consequences. The glamorous Motorama exhibits never showed the resulting smog blanketing major cities, the destruction of established neighborhoods to build interstate highways, or the sheer spatial impossibility of accommodating hundreds of millions of private vehicles. He treated civil engineering as a clean, frictionless magic wand, entirely ignoring the complex, compounding side effects of mass motorization. Ultimately, Motorama was never a genuine blueprint for human society. It was a beautiful, fundamentally impossible marketing tool designed to move steel and glass off dealership lots. Yet, there is a distinct reason those archival promotional films and restored fiberglass prototypes still captivate us today. General Motors packaged and sold a profound, unironic optimism about the future that feels entirely absent from our current era. We might be stuck dealing with the crowded, flawed reality of that mid-century automobile boom, but we are still trying to recapture the hopeful imagination those spectacular automobile shows left behind. Thank you so much for watching this documentary. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, so please leave a comment below and let me know which retro-futuristic concept vehicle from the 1950s you wish actually made it to the highway. While that pristine automated future never arrived, GM's Motorama successfully built the foundational aesthetics of the modern American automotive dream. Their bold, space-age vision permanently shaped our enduring romance with the open road. Which of GM's 1950s concept cars do you wish had actually made it to production? Let us know in the comments. If you want to uncover more forgotten history and explore the designs that almost were, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.